We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to AVRant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H.
Terry. Another floor plan. Oh, and it's even to scale. I haven't clicked on this one yet, but I'm going to click on it now. And I'm clicking, and then it'll open. It'll take forever, and I can read while it's doing that. All right. Terry has refined his plans for moving his home theater from the open, irregularly shaped basement to a mostly rectangular enclosed room upstairs. The room is about 13 feet 2 inches by 19 feet 9 inches with some minor variances. And after replacing the drop ceiling tiles with drywall, the ceiling will be 92 inches high. How many feet is that? I gotta do the math. It's 9 feet? 9 feet?
7.5?
Oh, whatever.
Is that right?
My math foo is weak. That's why my wife's an engineer. I'm always like, the kids ask me for stuff. I'm like, ask your mom. Okay, so anyways, it'll be 92 inches high, except for the back half of the room which will have a 10-inch tall riser for the second row. So it'll be 82 inches high.
Right.
Which sounds low. Anyways, the riser will be as wide as the room and will start about 9.5 feet from the front wall and extend to the back wall. 9.5 feet from the front wall.
So not quite half the length of the room.
Yeah.
He's got 10 feet 3 inches of floor space in front of the riser. Yeah?
9.5 feet. Oh yeah, okay, 3 inches. There you go.
Yeah,
I
10
was
feet,
wondering where
10
you got
feet 3 inches of floor.
I was wondering where you got the 3 inches from. I
riser.
just had to do the math in my head. All right. It took me a while. I should use my fingers. They had a slide rule. My dad used to have a slide rule. I wonder what happened.
Abacus.
Anyways, the plan is for a 120-inch 16:9 screen. Originally, he wanted to do an acoustically transparent screen with a false wall with the center speaker behind it. But after talking to Ray Coronado and Terry's local dealer, he has rethought that. With a false wall, the front row would have to be almost dead center in the room, which would not be ideal. Instead, he's decided to put the center channel below the screen, make the second row the prime seating, leave enough space for the back row in the back for a third row of bar stools with a minimal counter surface. The 120-inch screen should allow the center channel to be at reasonable height below it. All right. I'm going to look at the click on the. Oh my goodness, this thing is tiny. Okay, how do I make this bigger?
Well. Yeah, so okay, so his first question is, do we have any problems with the design? And gosh, I don't want to muddy the waters because this is a perfectly reasonable plan. But I just want to point out that going by the measurements he has here, his second row being the primary row, and I have no beef with that, but it's on the riser, so we know we went 10 feet 3 inches into the room. Then he's going to have like a little over a 2-foot walkway in front of the seats on that riser, right?
Yeah.
So we're at 12 feet 6 inches or so right now. And then the depth of the seat is going to be, what, about 2 feet? Is that about right for the depth of the seat when he's sitting in there?
I guess.
So I think you're sitting somewhere in the vicinity of 14.5 feet away from your screen. So if you're going 120 inches diagonal, that's like 34-degree field of view, which is fine. That is totally fine if that's what you want. But to me, it seems a little bit on the small side. Right? I don't know.
That's what he likes.
Yeah, I just want to point it out. Right? Because the thing is, his
You're
front
sitting far
row
enough away
is
from
still...
this thing that you should be able to make that an almost entire front wall of the screen.
Yeah, but I mean, his front row is still more or less in the center of his room. It's ever so slightly in front, I think, of the center of his room, or really close. His front row is still basically in the center of his room. Now, the whole idea of a false wall, it is a false wall. Acoustically, the acoustics don't think the wall is there because it's acoustically transparent. So a false wall doesn't change the acoustic center of your room. You could still do an acoustically transparent screen that's 1.5, 2 feet deep. That would still, if you use the 120-inch acoustically transparent screen, now you've moved it a 1.5 or 2 feet closer to you, which would give you the larger field of view in that second row. And the first row would have a huge field of view, but if you're okay with that. So I don't want to muddy the waters, but I'm just thinking out loud in terms of how I would come at this. Personally, I'd want a larger field of view than what his second row will be getting with the current plan. And I don't see the issue with a false wall. I don't know. Tom?
I'm still trying to digest this picture, dude. It's like pink and everything.
Well, that's the riser.
I know. I'm trying to figure this thing out. And it just turned blue. I don't know why it turned blue. If I press this button, will it make it? I didn't highlight it, Rob. It just turned blue all by itself. I did highlight it somehow.
Yeah, nope. That's my. I think it makes sense to make that second row the primary row. It's just personally.
Yeah, I think so too. You know, the only thing that the acoustically transparent, because 2 feet with these golden ear Triton 2s that he's got, I'm not sure that's going to be deep enough. Do they have a side fire?
Well, no, but the towers don't have to go behind the screen. They can go on either side of the screen.
Yeah, so he doesn't really need a false wall. So you're saying just acoustically transparent drop screen.
Sure. Yeah. Or a false wall if you want to use fixed frame. The center speaker could still go behind the screen.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So what did Ray say? Because Ray's going to start yelling at us any second. I'm sure. Now.
Yeah, but I mean that, you know, because originally he was like he moved the seating, right? Originally
because of the center.
Yeah, originally he wanted a certain viewing distance, so he had the front row as the prime row, and he had it a little bit farther back in the room, so it was like dead center in the room. But there's this whole thing about the false wall changing the center of the room. It doesn't acoustically. There's some confusion here, at least on my end. So yeah, essentially that front row is still very close to the center of the room. It makes sense to make that second row the primary row. I would just think that either a larger screen or an acoustically transparent screen that can then be
okay. So his first question is, do we see any problems with the design? The answer is no. We don't see any problems with your design.
No, not directly.
As long as you're okay with the 34-degree field of view.
That's right.
If you would like something else, something closer, then you could still do a false wall, even if screen just juts out. You put your center behind it, and everything else stays basically the same. You're just moving the screen closer to you to give you a larger field of view. And your speakers all basically, they can come forward a little bit, but they don't really change that much. So the seating stays exactly where it is.
Yeah, the seating arrangement I think is good.
So you don't move the seats. You just move the screen into the room. Whether or not you use a drop screen or a false wall, immaterial. So that's our comment on it.
Right. I also think the speaker layout that you've suggested is great.
Yeah,
I don't see any problems there. And the overhead speakers, he's labeled them as top fronts and top rears. I might just simply relabel them as front heights and top middles, giving that your second row is your primary row.
Yeah, how far those top fronts are, yeah.
That is a really minimal thing. We're not talking about moving the speakers, just possibly changing what they're labeled in the AV receiver setup.
Yeah, and he can't have top rears and surround backs, though, right?
Sure you can. Yeah, you can have top rears and surround backs.
I thought
you can't have top rears and front and rear heights.
The rear heights, that's the one I'm thinking of. Okay.
But yeah,
all right, he already has an HSU VTF3 Mark IV and a Klipsch RW12. His dealer suggested replacing the Klipsch with another matching HSU sub because a Klipsch sub has a slower driver.
That's what he was told.
Than the HSU, and says ideally the waves coming out of each sub should match. Oh, God. And first of all, stop talking to this dealer.
How often is that our advice? It's shameful.
Like
how
always. What is it with dealers, man? Don't you guys know? I mean, anyways, he says that they should match in time to most accurately reduce modes.
There's a reason.
There's a science words. There's a bunch of science words in a row. Terry knows from us that room placement has great effect on the evenness, and will try using the 2 subs he has first.
Yes.
But does the dealer's argument make sense? He can't just be trying to sell him a new sub because he doesn't sell HSU. All right. I don't disagree with the dealer in that I might consider getting another HSU rather than keeping the Klipsch, because I think the HSU is probably a better sub.
Yeah, the VTF3 certainly plays louder than the RW12, and I believe plays lower as well.
But the Klipsch RW12 is no slouch. I've got no problems with that sub. But every other word that came out of that man's mouth, as reproduced here, is absolute garbage. Okay.
I will say that there are some subs that don't stop when they're supposed to. We call it overhang.
It has nothing to do with being slow or fast.
No. But there are some that have basically poor damping on the driver, either an underpowered amplifier or just a driver that, the suspension's too loose, it just keeps going. So there is such a thing as overhang, but when it comes to hearing bass, we cannot hear a single cycle of a deep bass sound. It has to play a number of cycles before our brain even registers it. It is bouncing around the room like crazy because your room is nowhere near 50 feet in every single direction. So this idea that it has to be, no. I mean, the speed it has to vibrate at is the frequency it's playing. So if it can't do that, it's way off. It's literally not doing its job whatsoever. So no, the rest of that is pretty much nonsense.
A slower driver, and says that ideally the waves coming out of each sub should match in time to most accurately reduce modes. Okay, if the subs aren't matching in time, if you're sending the same signal to both subs
Right.
and their drivers aren't going in and out at the same time, they're not playing the same notes.
That's right.
They are playing
literally
completely different notes.
Yeah.
All right? The speed that the driver moves is what dictates the stupid note.
That's
all
right.
right? That's what makes the different notes. Goes really fast, that's one note. Goes really slow, that's a different note. All right? That's how this works. So what that just said was absolute garbage. That has in no way any basis in scientific fact or reality. All right?
No.
And matching in time to accurately reduce modes, that's just gobbledygook. He just made that. He just literally straight up made that up, those words
So I
up.
assume they're talking more about transient response, which is the
We are assuming, but I think we're giving them too much credit. But yes.
Yeah, the attack and decay notes, and yes, there can be slight differences there. Like I say, there can definitely be overhang in some subwoofers, but your clip doesn't suffer from that to begin with. So this is all going to be about output and extension matching. I think you're absolutely right to try them together, before buying another sub, because I really think you'll be fine.
And just worry about placement. Don't worry about any of the other nonsense that came out of that guy's mouth.
Right.
And speaking of that guy, his dealer is also suggesting a Control 4 single room setup with the EA1 system. The dealer, thinks this IP control system is far superior to a Harmony system. Terry isn't convinced, partly because of the cost and mainly because Control 4 is only dealer programmable. He has some programming skills and would like to have the ability to set up and tweak his own system. It's part of the fun, he says.
Yeah.
However, he does like that Control 4 is compatible with the Amazon Echo, and the entire system would be controllable through voice commands. Do we see a reason to spend significantly more than a Harmony system and set up a Control 4 or Crestron or other higher-end system?
Maybe. I mean, it is a more capable system. It's a full home automation system.
Yeah,
Harmony,
I mean, what else are you going to hook this thing up to? Because it can control your blender. I mean, it does the whole 9 yards.
I mean, Harmony is working with a surprising, I would say, number of home automation products now, but it's not quite a true automation system. It's something that can individually control a lot of things and send out macros, send out activities, but it's not full home automation. Control 4 really can be. What I would suggest doing, Chris Heinonen reviewed a Control 4 system. It's not the exact same one you talk about. It's one from a couple years ago. But it gives a good idea because he does a nice comparison. He was a Harmony user. He wasn't necessarily looking for this, but he got the opportunity to review it, so he went for it. And he does a nice job in his review. So we'll have the link for that over at avrant.com. I would really recommend reading it because he says, okay, here's some really cool things you can do with Control 4 that you can't really do with a Harmony. If that's something you want to do, then maybe it's worth it. He also went ahead and took it's like a 4-day, full 8 hours a day training course.
Yeah, for Control 4.
To get certified, which then let him do the programming. You having programming experience, maybe that's something you'll want to do. Maybe you'll want to sign up for the course, take the course, and then you can configure and program your Control 4 system. That really might be worth it to you. So I'm not going to say, no, this isn't worth it in any situation. It very well might be to you. There's certainly stuff you can do here, and with an interface that might be more intuitive, nicer to use than Harmony's. So this is definitely a maybe.
What's the system that... Remember we used to have the guy that comes to all hangouts all the time? And he had programmed all the stuff in his house.
Well, he did Crestron.
He wasn't Crestron. No, he wasn't a dealer. He did something else. It was
we had Leaf, who did Crestron and basically got it unlocked. So okay, that's who I was thinking of.
Oh, I'm thinking of somebody else. I can't remember his name. But there's other home automation systems that are like Z-Wave and stuff like that.
Oh well, yeah, but
are that if you really want to get into that, I can very rarely can I get behind a system that is for a single home theater that is this powerful. Yes, you could use the Amazon Echo or whatever. Great, that's something that's maybe
you can use the Amazon Echo with Harmony using IFTTT.
Yes.
Or the somewhat clunky. I won't say the trigger word because people get upset when you say the trigger word out loud and it sets off their system. But you say trigger word, tell my Harmony to blah blah blah. That's the words you have to use. So it's not as nice because Control 4 works directly with the Amazon Echo now. So you can just say do this and it understands that. You don't have to say trigger word, tell my Harmony to. But you can use voice commands through your Amazon Echo with the Harmony that way. It's possible.
Right. So my point here is that if you're not going to automate more than just your home theater, I can very rarely get behind it. I had people over my house just the other day, and they completely freaked out when they saw that my remote had a touchscreen. Right. They were like, oh, your remote has a touchscreen? I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, we shouldn't forget that you can do a lot with a Harmony.
I mean, if voice command is the one thing that you're not going to be able to do with a Harmony, it's the one thing that you're probably not going to use all that much with your Crestron 4 either, to be honest with you.
Well,
you're probably going to get pretty tired of it.
You can do voice directly with the Harmony. If you use the smartphone app, you can press the little microphone icon and do it directly. I think he wants to use it with the Amazon Echo. So like I say, there's a workaround to do that too. But if you just want voice control, you can do it directly with Harmony without even using an Amazon Echo.
So, I mean, for me, it's just this whole idea. Like, I can get behind one of these systems, and I don't have anything against dealers. I really don't. I have things against dealers that say garbage in order to sell stuff.
Well, if they're selling AudioQuest cables, I leave.
That's true, but they're trying to make a buck, and I'm not going to begrudge them that. I do have a problem when they're not being honest, and even if it's out of ignorance, I don't care. It's not okay. It is not okay for them not to know the science, the basic science behind what they're saying. It's not okay for them to think that subwoofer drivers sometimes move slower or faster based on their quality. That has nothing to do with it. It either plays the note or it doesn't. It either moves or it doesn't. It's not okay to say the things that this guy's saying. Now, he is right that the Crestron 4 is much more powerful and they can do some cool stuff, and it's probably a lot more intuitive. It probably won't crash as often as my Harmony does, which doesn't crash that often, but sometimes 3 times in a couple-week period, I'll have to reset the remote. What does that entail? Holding the off button until it shuts itself down, and then clicking, and then it powers itself back up, and everything's all back to normal.
But if
that's
you
not
want
that much. That's not that much of an inconvenience compared to the cost that you're going to be outputting for this Control 4.
But if you're thinking you want to do the type of thing where someone rings your doorbell, you have a video doorbell.
Yes.
When they ring it, that shows up on your screen. It automatically pauses your movies, turns up the lights, like all this automation type of stuff. You actually can kind of do that by integrating a Harmony with a bunch of other do-it-yourself home automation stuff, and some people do it that way, but a Control 4 can put it in a much nicer, simpler to use interface, and actually once you learn how to program it, do it quite a bit more easily.
Now, if you're hearing all of this and you're thinking, I would really like to figure out how to do that myself, then that's your answer. And if you're hearing all this and you're thinking, I would really like all that stuff, but I don't want to do it myself, then your answer is go with your dealer, who's probably a perfectly fine Control 4 person.
Yeah.
Don't listen to his advice about speakers. Even though I agree that you should consider the other HSU. But if you're listening to it thinking, I don't want any of that. I just want to be able to turn my TV on and have everything come on and the lights and stuff like that.
Right.
You can totally do that with a Harmony. You can totally do that with a Harmony. Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.